The Life of Tris Prior. Beatrice Tris Prior is the main protagonist and narrator of the Divergent series. She's a strong-willed 16-year-old girl. Though Tris was born in the faction Abnegation, she eventually transferred to Dauntless and must face the fact that she is Divergent. When she arrived in her new faction, she opted for a change and decided to use Tris as a nickname for Beatrice, hoping for a fresh start. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the life of Tris Prior. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Early life. Beatrice was born to Andrew Prior and Natalie Prior within a year of her brother, Caleb Prior. Beatrice's family originated from Abnegation, the faction that cultivates the virtue of selflessness in the future city of Chicago. As a part of Abnegation, Beatrice has always known the life she would follow, one free of vanity and focused on serving others and helping the factionless. Despite this, she never fully learned to willingly follow her faction's virtues. She was often overshadowed by her brother's apparent selflessness and often found herself thinking about what she wanted. This caused her brother to scold her for her selfishness. She loved the idea of selflessness, but could not act it out. This was caused by her trait of divergence. Introduction. Beatrice gets a haircut from her mother. As she sneaks a glance into the mirror out of curiosity and notes that she still looked like a little girl, she also mentions that she turned 16 a few months ago. But her faction found it self-indulgent to celebrate birthdays, so she didn't celebrate her birthday. Beatrice says to her mother that she isn't nervous about the Aptitude Test and that the test didn't have to determine the faction she chose. At school, her classes are cut in half because of the Aptitude Tests. As she walks along the hallway, an erudite boy shoves her, and she reflects on how the erudite have been releasing antagonistic reports about abnegation. She pauses at a nearby window and watches the Dauntless arrive. She then turns away, thinking that watching them was pointless, and heads to her faction history class. Aptitude Test. After lunch, Beatrice sits in the cafeteria awaiting her test. Her gaze sweeps over the other factions where they are all having fun together except her faction. She expresses her doubt on everyone wanting to maintain their factional norm, but says she couldn't stray from her expectations. Her brother Caleb is called to take the test. He returns, pale and shaking, but she does not ask about his results. At that moment, her name is called. Beatrice walks into room 6. Mirrors cover the room. The ceiling glows white with light, and in the center of the room is a reclined chair like a dentist's with a machine next to it. The dauntless woman who is testing her reassures her it doesn't hurt. Divergent. In the simulation, Beatrice is first made to choose between the cheese and the knife, which she questions and refuses. After 2 more events, she wakes up to see a baffled Tori Wu saying her results were inconclusive, only having ruled out 2 factions, Amagi and Candor. Her choices in the simulation showed equal instances of abnegation, dauntless, and erudite. Tori tells Beatrice that she will delete the computer records upon telling her that she is divergent, and warns her not to tell anyone, not even her family. Beatrice later encounters a factionless man who asks for food and later cryptically tells her to choose wisely at the choosing ceremony. She arrives with her family at the ceremony, anxious about her choice. Her father is counting on her and her brother to choose abnegation. During the ceremony, Beatrice is deeply surprised by the fact that her brother Caleb chose erudite, the faction of knowledge, instead of abnegation, the faction of the selfless. When it's her turn, she knows that choosing abnegation would require an act of selflessness, but choosing dauntless would require an act of bravery, therefore proving she belongs in either one. Her choice not only surprised her family but herself, by choosing to spill her blood on the hot coals instead of the rocks, therefore choosing dauntless. Before they leave, Beatrice takes one last glance at her family. She sees her mother smiling at her, and her father staring at her with a look of accusation, and her brother already happily adjusting with his new faction. Upon seeing Caleb, she realizes that she must, and eventually will adjust as well. As the Dauntless run towards the train station, her confusion dissipates and is replaced by exhilaration. Here, she meets Christina, a transfer from Candor, when Beatrice jumps on the train. When they arrive at their destination, they must jump off of the train onto the roof, which is at least 7 stories below. At the point when everyone has jumped off, Beatrice asks Christina if they should jump off together, which Christina accepts. From here, Beatrice is already teased about her being from Abnegation when Peter Hayes, another transfer from Candor, calls her a stiff, which is a nickname or slang for abnegation, provoked and proud. She decides to jump off first when Max, a Dauntless leader, tells them to jump off the roof to get into the compound. Taking off her long-sleeved abnegation top, leaving a tight gray t-shirt, she left her abnegation conservativeness. She laughs as she drops into the net meant to catch them below. She grabs onto one of the hands reaching up to her, and Tobias, Eaton, their instructor, supports her as she drops down. She's then asked for her name, and with saying that she should think carefully as she can't pick again, she chooses a new name that would go with her life change, Triss. She's then cheered on by a crowd of Dauntless members as the first jumper. Initiation. After separating from the Dauntless initiates under Lauren, being toured by and briefed on the initiation process by their young Dauntless leader Eric, they find out that only the top 10 initiates will become members. Instead of being dissuaded, Triss becomes more determined to get through initiation and become a member. They learn that the first few lessons will be related to fighting, basically wielding weapons and other physical work. She meets Will, an erudite transfer, during their shooting lesson, and with him and Christina is later joined by Al, a Candor transfer, who Triss and everyone else heard crying and screaming the night before. The next thing Triss, Christina, Will, and Al decide to do is get Dauntless physical uniqueness, to feel like they've actually left their old factions and be all the way in with Dauntless by looking the part. Christina gets Triss a makeover and a new wardrobe, and as Al is getting his spider tattoo, Triss sees Tori again and she gets her first tattoo. 3 ravens from her collarbone to her heart, one for each member of the family she left behind. The next day, though, they learn that another training activity is the sparring of initiates against each other. Since there is an odd number of initiates who transferred, one of them won't be fighting that day, Triss. She watches as Will and Al are set against each other, with Al unwillingly knocking out Will, Christina against Molly, a crony of Peter, who will in turn be fighting another one of his cronies, Drew. The next battle between Molly and Christina is intense. Molly beats Christina up to the point where Christina just stops the fight. Eric, obviously not happy with Christina, orders her and the other initiates to follow him out as he leads them to the chasm. He then shoves Christina against the railing and tells her to climb over it and hang over the other side for 5 minutes, or she fails initiation and will leave to be factionless. Despite the difficulty and several close calls, she makes it through the 5 minutes and Eric orders her to come up. Against Eric's order, although he never said she had to get up on her own, Al and Triss help her up. Triss, during her fight against Peter, is determined to at least try and show them she is not weak enough to be ranked last. She initially tries attacking Peter, but once Peter starts seriously inflicting damage against her, moves on to defend herself. Wanting to stay on her feet, she stands up every time Peter makes her fall. Before she finally loses consciousness, she notices leave the arena. It has been said that she was barely alive when shouts enough and rushes her to the hospital. The next morning, though still aching all over, Triss is forced to get up early and with Christina's help, makes it to the tracks in time for their departure. Later that day, the initiates, both transfers and Dauntless born, are awakened in the middle of the night for a game of Capture the Flag, a Dauntless tradition where they use guns loaded with paintballs instead of the real thing. They are brought to the old, distant part of the city and divided into 2 teams, one under and the other under Eric. Triss is picked by along with Christina, Will, Drew, Uriah, Marlene, and other Dauntless-born initiates. Given a head start, 4's team get off first and look for a hiding place for their flag. At a carousel past the marsh, tells his team to formulate a strategy. Differences in opinions result in arguments, so as the others fight over their next move, Triss wanders off towards the Ferris wheel, hoping to get a high enough vantage point of the other team. Then follows her and climbs up with her. Asks Triss about what she thinks the purpose of the game is. Triss answers that it might be about learning strategy and teamwork, which she takes back and says it doesn't seem like Dauntless' priority when laughs. Says that it should and used to be. When Triss loses balance once, climbs up to level with her and supports her. The higher they got, the more nervous seemed, just as Triss, but for different reasons. Had been making Triss feel anxious for a while now, and is afraid of heights. Triss, realizing that they weren't high enough, continues to climb, but this time, without the ladder rungs to hold onto, uses the Ferris wheel's supports and bars. Despite 4's fear of heights, he follows Triss. At a higher point now, Triss now sees the other team at the other end of the pier. When they return to the carousel, Triss formulates a plan for the remaining members guarding the flag. As their plan is a success, she reaches for it and so does Christina. She later joins the cheers of her teammates. Triss excels during target practice with knives. Al, though, is the only initiate who hasn't yet hit the target after half an hour, getting on the nerves of the pissed off more than usual Eric. When Al misses again, he tells Al to get his knives while everyone else is throwing theirs at the target. Al, being as stubborn as he normally is, refuses and answers back, saying he's afraid of getting stabbed by airborne knives, lighting the fuse on Eric's anger. He then orders Al to stand in front of the target as 4 throws knives at the target behind him until he learns not to flinch. Triss, unable to stop herself, speaks up and tells them to stop, telling Eric that any idiot can stand in front of a target, and that it doesn't prove anything except that Eric is bullying them, a sign of cowardice. Eric then has Triss stand in front of the target in Al's place. As 4 throws knives at the target, he gives her subtle messages about her strength and selflessness, which she mistakes for underestimation and taunts, infuriating her into shouting at him to shut up, before 4 intentionally nicks her ear to avoid the suspicion that he likes her from Eric. Eric, impressed about Triss's daring attitude, sends everyone else away and tells Triss that he should keep his eye on her as he smiles at her, gripping her shoulder. Triss stays behind with 4, and when they're alone, 4 approaches her. She confronts him about hitting her on purpose. He admits this and says she should thank him because he just helped her and that he's getting tired of waiting for her to catch on, leaving Triss confused about what he meant. On visiting day, her mother Natalie visits her. Natalie tells Triss about how her father has become very selfish lately, and that they cannot visit Caleb because the erudite now prohibits Abnegation visitors from entering their compound. Her mother asks her about her rankings and eventually asks her about her Aptitude Test results. Triss, unable to keep it from her mom, tells her about her divergence. Natalie tells her to keep a low profile to avoid being watched, and that she loves her no matter what faction she chose. She then instructs her to go to the erudite compound and ask Caleb to investigate the simulation serum, and leaves. This is when Triss realizes that her mother was from Dauntless. During dinner, when their conversation leads to the aptitude tests, Triss becomes anxious, since if she talks about her choices during the test, they might come to realize something about her divergence. Christina, though, and Al realize that she is hiding something because of her body language. She just goes on and tells them the incomplete truth that she got Abnegation but just chose Dauntless. For Stage 1, Edward is ranked first, followed by Peter, Will, Christina, Molly, Triss, Drew, Al, and Myra is last. That night, Peter stabs Edward in the eye with a butter knife. Triss, remembering her mother's comforting her once she was injured as a child, tries this same tactic with Edward as they wait for the doctor. Triss volunteers to clean Edward's blood off their dormitory floor. Knowing that the Dauntless will not do anything for Edward and that Peter was the one who did it, she and Christina decide not to report Peter. The following night, Edward and Myra quit the initiation and leave. With the departure of the two, everyone else's ranks are raised. One afternoon, while Triss hides away in the hallway to get away from the smell of blood in their dormitory, Uriah, with other Dauntless-born initiates and some members, sees her and lets her tag along with them for an initiation ritual. At the top, they find out that the ritual is sliding down a steel cable in a black sling. Now in line, Triss finds herself both excited and agitated, and even impatient as she watches the members slide down first. While hurtling through the cable on her sling, she is exhilarated, filled with adrenaline, and immensely amazed at the sight below her, throwing her arms out to the side as if she was flying. When the cable comes to its end, she sees the other Dauntless members 20 feet below her, forming a net of limbs to catch her as she jumps down. Trusting them to catch her, she drops down. When the Dauntless ask for her reaction, she asks, "When can I go again?" and the members laugh with her. Realizing that it is this camaraderie that forms among the Dauntless after they've all risked their lives together, she becomes even more determined to survive initiation and be Dauntless, feeling genuinely eager to be one of them for the first time. During the first session of the second stage of initiation, they learn that it will involve simulations that teach them to control their, as stated when they first arrive, emotions in the midst of a frightening situation. The simulation will only end once they calm down, hence lowering their heart rate and slowing their breathing. The fears in their simulations may take the form of their real and physical fears, or symbolic manifestations of their emotional fears, which is the case for Triss's first situation, being devoured by crows, which, as later revealed, refers to her fear of being powerless. After 3 minutes, which seem like an almost half hour to Triss in her simulation, and is at least 3 times faster than everyone else, she finally calms down and wakes up in a fit, eventually comforted by 4. For Triss's second fear session, she is in a glass box being filled with water. Surrounding her in the pit are her fellow initiates, friends and enemies together, watching and laughing as she almost drowns. When she spots Will, she remembered what he had recently told her the other day. He said that the simulations are only in their minds, so she realizes that if that were true, then she must be able to control the simulation. She cracks the glass and wakes up from her simulation. Since breaking the glass is directly manipulating the simulation, signifying awareness and control while under, 4 realizes that Triss is Divergent. 4 tells her that he will delete the footage and tells her to hide her divergence during her next simulations if she doesn't want to end up dead at the bottom of the chasm. Confused, she goes to Tori, who, she hopes, has the answers to her questions. Tori then explains to her how only a Divergent could be capable of manipulating or even shutting down and being aware while in a simulation. She also tells her that when among Dauntless, those who are Divergent tend to die, mostly because the Dauntless leaders see them as threats and kill them. To prove her point, she tells Triss about how they killed her Divergent brother Georgie by pushing him into the chasm and making it look like a suicide. After these, she's now certain that she knows what fear is and what being Dauntless actually means. She and several other initiates have sleepless nights or nightmares about their simulations. Triss's fear seems to pale theirs by comparison, so she still feels slightly strong while everyone else is breaking down. She's unsure whether her drive is her Divergence or 4, who has recently become even more of a distraction for her. When Triss comes out first among the transfers for their rankings for Stage 2, followed by Peter, although Triss's average simulation time of 2 minutes and 45 seconds is conspicuously short and far from everyone else's. Peter does not take it well. He confronts her, and when Will tries to defend her, he turns her friends against her by accusing Triss of manipulating them by acting weak to be pitied, then psyching them out by being tough to edge them out of Dauntless rankings, which both Will and Christina consider as they walk out on her. When everyone is asleep, she gets out of bed and leaves their dormitory for a drink of water when she overhears Eric talking to a woman who seems to be the one who made Max appoint him as a Dauntless leader, about watching simulations to find Divergent rebels. Before she sees who the woman is, however, someone pulls her from behind. Peter, Al, and Drew put a blindfold over her eyes, cover her mouth, and tie her hands behind her back. They drag her over to the chasm. They hang her backward over the railing as Peter gropes her chest and attempts to rape her. He releases her when 4 comes to her rescue. Al and Peter run, leaving Drew to be beaten up by 4. Triss wakes up in 4's room, where he tends to her. In the midst of intimate moments, he tells her that, for the time being, she should show some vulnerability so that Peter and the others stop making her a target, and so that her friends will want to protect her. After Triss tells 4 about how they touched her, though, 4 tells her to ruin them when she gets the chance. She stays in his room for the night. She enters the dining hall after 4, bruised and limping, unwillingly pretending to be weak. Will, Christina, and Uriah worriedly ask about what happened, and when she tells them who attacked her, they are shocked about Al's involvement. In the afternoon, when Triss, Christina, and Will get back to the dorm, Al, who appears to have been crying, wants to speak to Triss. Will and Christina are protective over her, Will saying that Al doesn't get to come near her ever again. Al begs Triss to forgive him, repenting for his actions. Triss calls Al a coward, tells him to stay away from her, and that if he ever comes near her again, she will kill him. Al has committed suicide by pitching himself over the ledge. As someone pushes Al's eyelids shut, Triss thinks that it is stupid that people want to pretend death is sleep when it isn't. As Triss made her way to Amity as a form of a safe house for the time being, they are forced to comply with the same rules as the other Amity that have to go with the condition of their stay. The rules are, 1. Any sign of physical or emotional conflict of any sort will be dealt with by the member being told to leave the compound. 2. You must do chores at the compound like farming, dishes, cooking, and also cleaning up after people like children and elderly. Number 3. You must comply with the faction's laws, otherwise you are to be factionless. But when they are about a few days in at their time at Amity, Peter then steals the hard drive from Triss, causing her to act violently, and is sent to a room to answer some questions. The Dauntless traders come to see if there are any suspicious characters in the faction. Then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose as Tobias and Triss are spotted, and they run with Peter, Marcus, Caleb, and Susan. The other Abnegation have to stay at Amity due to what happened. They make it onto a train, and just Tobias, Caleb, and Triss are told to get off, and they see Edward, who only has respect for Triss as she was the only one who helped him after what Peter had done to him. Then 4 says that his name is Tobias Eaton, and then Edward says, "We have been looking for you," and that is when he is taken to see his mother along with Triss. Then after that, they stay the night and head to Candor, where Caleb went due to being told that he was going with Susan to meet up with the other Abnegation, who were hiding out in the other factionless safe homes. They later meet up with Tori and Christina and the remaining pure Dauntless that haven't been taken over by the corrupt Dauntless, who is an erudite. 4 and Triss are forced to go under the truth serum, in which Triss reveals that her mother and father are dead, and she is responsible for Will's death, and that makes Christina upset and leave. Then after that, the attack on Candor, which leads the corrupt Dauntless to put the faction to sleep, only to gather the Divergent, which was a mistake as Max is killed only with Eric. Then Triss goes to the erudite as a form of surrender, and she is experimented on and almost dies due to Peter swapping the death serum for the paralytic serum. Allegiant. Triss is shocked by the video released by Tobias to the public at the end of the raid on the erudite headquarters. The video revealed the truth about the faction system and announced that the Divergent are needed outside the borders of the city. Factionless leader Evelyn Johnson appoints herself leader of the city, forcing people to operate under her command and live as factionless citizens. Tension between the factionless and the former faction members escalates, culminating in a deadly fight over the bowls used at the faction choosing ceremony. Triss questions Evelyn's motives and is kidnapped by the Allegiant, a rebel group determined to escape the city and reinstate their old way of life, who invite her to a meeting the following night. Meanwhile, Triss's brother Caleb is put on trial for assisting former erudite leader Janine Matthews. Caleb's betrayal, still fresh in her mind, prevents Triss from completely forgiving her brother. Tobias informs Triss that Caleb was decided to be a traitor and sentenced to be executed in 2 weeks. The Allegiant, led by Kara and Johanna, plan to send a group outside the city to find the truth about their existence and way of life. Triss volunteers to go on one condition, that Caleb is taken with them. Tobias and Zeke break Caleb out of his holding cell before they leave. Tobias, Triss, Christina, Kara, Uriah, Tori, Peter, and Caleb escape the city. Here they learn the truth about their society. Many, many years ago, the government believed that society's problems were caused by people's bad genes. In an attempt to create a better society, they began to fix people's genes with disastrous results. To fix its mistake, the government set up experiments, establishing isolated cities across the remains of the United States in the hopes of raising enough genetically pure, divergent individuals to fix the genetic damage left in the wake of the Purity War. Triss and Tobias are tested by Matthew and Nita to verify and study their divergence. While Triss is shown to be truly divergent, Tobias' genetic structure indicates that his genes are still damaged. Tobias is angered by this news and begins to believe that he is a damaged human being. Matthew then brings Triss to the leader of the Bureau, David, to find out the truth about her mother. David gives Triss her mother's journal. Meanwhile, Tobias is secretly asked to join a rebellion led by Nita, who is also genetically damaged. She tells him that the Bureau is lying when they say genetic damage is the cause of society's problems. She intends to demonstrate that the genetically pure are flawed as well. Tobias tells Triss about the plan, going against Nita's warning to keep it secret. Triss is unsure about Nita's plans, but Tobias tells her that she's being jealous of Nita, and he agrees to help. Triss confronts Tobias and temporarily ends their relationship, leaving Tobias to try not to think about the things he has done. Triss is then offered a position on the Bureau's council and is told of the events taking place within the city, including the Allegiant's preparations for war with Evelyn and the factionless. David is desperate to stop the violence and maintain his life's work at the expense of destroying the personalities of everyone in the city. He decides to use the memory serum to wipe the memories of the people within the city, allowing the experiment to begin with a clean slate. Triss learns that the Bureau created the serums that led to the destruction of Abnegation and the enslaving of Dauntless. Repulsed by the Bureau's actions and David's decision, she leaves the Bureau. Triss reconciles with Tobias, and they both admit their deep love for each other and finally sleep together. The next day with her friends, she begins to create a plan to save her city. The group decides to break into the weapons lab and use the memory serum to wipe the memories of the Bureau. The lab is guarded by a fatal dose of the death serum, making it a suicide mission. Caleb volunteers for the role, tearfully asking Triss if it will make her forgive him for everything he has done. Triss says yes. For Christina, Peter, and Amar plan to go into the city to inoculate their loved ones against the serum. Christina is able to retrieve doses of the inoculation serum and tells the group to inject themselves with it. For notices that Peter only pretends to inject himself. Christina gives an extra vial of memory serum to For use against either Marcus, his father, or Evelyn, his mother, in the hopes of bringing an end to the conflict in the city. For decides to confront Evelyn. Taking Peter and the vial of memory serum, For meets with his mother and gives her the option of drinking it, which will allow her to end the fighting, be born anew, and become his mother again. She embraces For without taking the serum. They meet with Johanna and Marcus to iron out an end to the conflict. On the way out of Erudite headquarters, Peter laments his bad behavior and violent tendencies, which he knows will never change, and says he wants to take the memory serum to become a new person. For gives Peter the serum, erasing his mind for good. At the Bureau, Caleb is ready to sacrifice himself, but he and Triss, who accompanied him, are ambushed by Bureau guards. Triss pulls her gun on Caleb and decides to carry out the mission herself, knowing that Caleb volunteered out of regret for his former actions rather than out of love for her. She hopes that her resistance to serums will include the death variant. Not knowing if she will survive, Triss tells Caleb that if she does not return, she should tell For she did not want to leave him. Triss destroys the entrance to the lab and is exposed to the death serum, but she survives. David goes inside the lab and explains that her collusion with the genetically damaged did not go unnoticed. Determined to keep the order, David shoots Triss, who lunges for the memory serum and releases it. After being shot by David, she slowly slips into darkness until she sees her mother reach out for her, and then she gladly accepts her mother's embrace, succumbing to her wounds and passing away. Tobias, Peter, and Christina return to the compound and are told about Triss's death by Kara. Caleb gives him Triss's final message. Tobias is angered by the fact that Triss died for Caleb even after his betrayal. Before walking away, Caleb only replies that Triss never wanted to leave him. Tobias returns to his home in the old Abnegation sector. After cutting his hair, Tobias is ready to use the memory serum on himself, hoping to rid the loss of Triss and Uriah from his memory. Christina walks in on him and convinces him not to use it, saying that Triss would want him to remember her. Acknowledging the need to move on, Tobias and Christina walk back together. 2.5 years later, Chicago is finally at peace, with former faction members, factionless, compound members, and other outsiders moving in and out of the city. Tobias accepts all that he has been through and reflects on his belief that while life damages everyone, and it may take time, people can always be mended. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.